Hello there, this is Raul Handa, founder and CEO of the Fortuna Group and the host of the FFTB show. We're yet again here today with another exciting episode of the FFTB show with a wonderful guest, an inspiring leader, a very beautiful and inspiring leader. We're very excited to welcome her. She's the vice president at Nuitée, a global leader in travel technology. She's got an extensive experience in hospitality, international corporations, travel tech, and startups. She excels in commercial strategy, marketing, leadership, sales. She's a Swiss Azeri business leader, passionate about travel. She's driven impactful results and fostered global growth while inspiring professionals worldwide. She recently won the Businesswoman of the Year in Hospitality at the 2024 Global Edition of the Fortuna Global Excellence Awards. She's one of a kind. She's a hustler. And I'm very, very happy to introduce you to Leyla Allahverdiyeva. Hi, Leyla. How are you?
Hi. Thanks, Raul. That was such a lovely intro.
Thank you. Awesome.
You made me blush.
Well, you look very beautiful today.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. So, Leyla, interesting career. You've done a lot of work in hospitality, in travel, and we'll get to that. First, we know everything that the Leyla has done today. It's a two-part question. First of all, tell us more about the Leyla that was there 20 years ago and Swiss Azeri. That's exotic. Tell us a little bit more about that as well.
Yeah, well, 20 years ago, I wish I could say I was just born. But yes, I think, so starting from the Swiss Azeri, I guess we'll start from there. Originally, I am from Azerbaijan, and that's where I was born, and my parents are from, and a beautiful, beautiful country if you haven't yet visited. We had moved to Switzerland when I was quite young, and I grew up and I was raised there. So really, those two cultures were very, very important for me, like, I think, in my upbringing, because they're so different and at the same time so wonderful, each one. So that is how the Swiss Azeri element came in. So I have, there's always a lot of Swiss chocolate around and very good caviar from Azerbaijan. So yes. And then I guess the Leyla from 20 years ago has experienced a lot of things that, everyone goes through certain difficulties and highs and lows. And that is probably why every time we have to evolve and change. And I think very grateful to people along the way that help you do that. But yeah, I was always very much into hospitality and travel and seeing the world. So I think even 20 years ago, I kind of decided that was the industry I wanted to go into.
You said you said that this is what you always wanted to do. 20 years ago, you wanted to get into travel, you wanted to get into hospitality, and that's what you're doing today. But where did the motivation come from?
I think, thankfully my parents were always trying to get me to discover a lot of different countries and cities. And my mother and my father, they were very open about different countries and different people. And really that was conversations that we had at home very, very often. When we moved to Switzerland, actually, we had this tradition every weekend. We would just basically, Switzerland is very easy to travel within trains. So every weekend, my parents would just pick a place on the map and say, "Hey, we're going to go there," and we would just travel around. So that was very opening, and it was incredible to see how different things are just across the border. And I think that's where kind of the travel aspect came in from. And then I was very, very interested in understanding how does everything work behind the scenes of travel? Because usually when, I think when you're going into a hotel or whether you're in a train or whatnot, there's so much behind the scenes.
Right.
And that's where actually I started with. I was very much in love with the hotel industry.
Right.
And then I evolved into the
How
travel
old
tech.
were you when you moved from Azerbaijan to Switzerland?
I was, I want to say 9.
9.
Yes, I think 9,
So
10.
You were about
probably.
10, so you were a tween, right?
Yeah.
You're not very young. You've already lived 10 years.
I'm not very young.
No, when you were 10, you were not
yes.
very young. I'll ask that again. Okay, so when you were 10, you were not you were not very, very young back then. Like you understood what was happening. You moved to Switzerland. How was that change? It was a cultural change, obviously. The weather, I'm not sure. I've never been to Azerbaijan, but I'm sure the weather was also different. The language, the food, a lot of things were different.
Yeah.
How did you adjust?
It was definitely very, very different, especially with the fact that I had to learn French. I mean, I had French in school before, of course, but it wasn't like you're thrown into a French environment. So we moved to the French side of Switzerland, and it was very much, and I have to say, at the time it didn't seem good, but I have to thank my parents for that. It was very much like sink or swim. And yeah, so I think that was probably the hardest change at first, learning the language very fast, because, in order to communicate or make friends or anything, it was it was very important. I did go to international school, thankfully, which was, there was still English, which I had learned actually in Azerbaijan when I grew up. So that was helpful, but still the surroundings you needed to adjust. And I think one of the things was punctuality that we needed to. It was quite surprising as to how buses can actually be on time,
Right.
which was I mean, an adjustment on my end, and just a very different culture altogether. So it was not easy, but I think at a time like that, it's still adaptable for a child to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So you moved when you were 10. You were in Switzerland. You did your high school. Then you moved. You did your graduation as well in
Yes.
Switzerland. Tell us more about that journey, getting into grad school. How was that time?
Because I was always in love with hotels from a young age, I did want to go to. So I went to the École Hôtelière in Lausanne, and which is,
I love the way you say it. Can you say that again?
École Hôtelière de Lausanne.
Okay.
Yes, we can do part of it in French if you need that. Yeah, so and that's obviously it's the world's best hospitality school.
Wow.
And for me, it was actually I decided I wanted to go there even before we moved. I had a little project in school where I had to interview somebody who I really wanted to explore career of, and it was a hotel manager at the time who told me that that's the best school to go to.
Right.
And for me, ever since I was a child, I was like, I have to go to Lausanne and study there. And thankfully, things worked out very well in that case. That was, and there, I started understanding that with, as much as I loved hotels, there was all this background that goes into that. And then with hotels, it was still more static. So I wanted to be like, okay, how do I connect all of the hotels? How do they connect to the outside world? And that's what kind of kept me moving into the travel technology space. And that's where it sort of ended up with and now. But yeah, grad school was, it was still in Switzerland. But after that, I had, I worked in hotels and then luxury retail. And then after that, I actually moved to the U.S. for a bit to do kind of an executive course there. So
Interesting. So before we move on to talking about Nuitée and the hospitality and what you're doing, this is, again, this is a question that I always ask people that have interesting profiles and come from exotic places like yourself. If there was one decision that you'd probably change, or a decision that you regret that you've taken, it could be, taking up the wrong job, or breaking up with the wrong guy, or taking up a different course, or anything. But one decision or one event in your life that you'll probably take a time machine, go back, and do it another way.
I tend to live with no regrets. I think that is, it's something that I was really raised with. Every mistake you make is making you a different person, and it teaches you to become better. So I don't think there's regrets. I think maybe certain things perhaps I should have paid attention to a little bit more, maybe in school in certain classes, which I think would have helped later on. But I don't think, I do think that maybe spending time with loved ones who are no longer here, that's probably the only thing I really regret. But other than that, I think I don't really live with regrets. I think that it's part of who you are, and every mistake or every step you take is making you the person who you're meant to be eventually.
Interesting. Do you believe in work-life balance, or are you a workaholic?
I mean, I say I do, but I think people at work would disagree. I think that's also part of the beauty that working in the industry that I am. I think that, I have a passion for traveling, which is great because I do get to travel a lot, albeit it gets quite tiring with the time zones. And in fact, a lot of the times I don't even know what day or time it is. But yeah, I think I think that helps. So I think that, having a passion in travel and working in the travel industry does help. However, I think it also balances with sometimes I don't notice that it's still work and not that life balance. I do wish I'd have more time, I think, for doing my favorite sports even more, but that's probably going to come.
What's your passion? How do you release the stress? How do you get your mental health back in place?
Well, apart from traveling.
Apart from traveling, yes.
I love tennis. I think that's...
Wow,
yes,
okay.
I love to play tennis and swimming. I think those are, when I can, albeit, again, these are sports that do take time. So, but yeah, sometimes just kind of grounding yourself and sitting down and just thinking about and being very grateful. I think that helps a lot. We don't realize the world moves very, very fast.
Absolutely.
And you need to take time and just take a moment and thank for everything you have. And regardless the challenges, you're becoming stronger in that. So
Interesting. Are you a spiritual person?
I am. Yes, I hope so.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Interesting. So, what's the religion in Azerbaijan?
Well, Azerbaijan is mostly Muslim. I was raised, we were really raised in quite mixed families, so which I think was really great. And it shows really that God is one, at least for me and my family. And that's why, looking at so many different things that are happening in the world, it's
Right.
That are based again within religion or separation. I think it's important. I'm happy that I was raised in a time where really I believe that we're all one.
Interesting. So you're Swiss Azeri now. We know that.
Yes.
Obviously, you've got an extensive knowledge and experience in hospitality. So how has your multicultural background influenced your leadership style, and how do you approach international businesses?
Really, I think it's been an immense help. And again, very grateful for my parents having made that possible for me. Especially leading different teams around the world. It's very important to establish the right ways and the right cultural understandings, because everybody's very different, right? And whether you're leading a very aggressive team of hunters or not, or wherever you're happening, it's important to be able to approach everyone in the right manner and really to hopefully motivate the team in the right manner too. So I think understanding those different cultures helps a lot when you're, especially nowadays, everybody's remote. A very
Absolutely.
big portion of our team is remote.
Right.
And previous companies I've worked in was the same. So I think having that multicultural background really helped me, at least, to really to find the right balance and ways to communicate. I think that's where I see it. Yeah, and I think being from Azerbaijan, it does make you very social. So
It does?
yes, I think
Okay.
so. We're quite a social people.
Right. Okay.
The Swiss
Okay.
were the Swiss side can be reserved and more shy, I think. But
Okay.
yes.
Interesting. Okay. So I'm not sure. Are there a lot of women leaders in hospitality?
I would hope so. I think there's definitely, and I really appreciate, I think this was wonderful that there's this acknowledgement right now. I think there's more and more coming about, and it's great to see that. But I think that within travel technology, that's probably where we need a bit more, need more stance there. But yeah, I think it's becoming much more. What is the word in English? Now I forgot it. Sorry, too many languages in
That's
my
all
head.
right.
But yeah, I think it's evolving, and it's great to see that I think that's one of the industries where it's been moving faster.
Okay.
Probably.
Have you been undermined ever because you were a woman and a leader?
Honestly speaking, and I'm very grateful to a lot of the mentors I've had. No, and I think that's one of the things that we as women also need to acknowledge, that it's important to have mentors that are women, but it's also important to have mentors that are male and that can help you, right, in terms of not making that difference, right? So, and I think that sometimes we don't give enough credit to that. So I think, no, thankfully I've never felt undermined in that way. I think it's more, sometimes I think the age, or maybe I look too young or something, But
You are young. It's not that you look young.
thank you. I think with what I feel that, yes, we definitely need to have mentors that are women, and really people to look up to. But I think it's important to acknowledge that we need to have also, men who are helping us, helping the women, and not seeing that difference between if it's and really trying to base people upon merit and upon the efforts and the intellect rather than anything else. So I've been very blessed with that. And I think honestly, my parents have always kind of helped that equality. Sometimes I think I'm not as feminine as I should be. Sometimes you have to be a bit more pushy. But it's part of me.
Interesting. So you had your mom along at the 2024 Global
yes.
Edition while you were receiving your award. Again, a two-part question. How was it getting due recognition at such a large platform? And what did it mean to get your mother along and see her cheering for you from the sidelines?
Well, I hope she was proud.
I'm sure she told me she was. She told me she was
That's
very
good.
proud
Yes.
of you. Yeah.
And yeah, I think it was. It's important to have the most important people with you, I think, and of course, it's great to have partners and children there, and I think a lot of people brought different members of their family there. But I think it was one of the things. I lost my dad a long time ago, and it was. I think this way it was just me telling her that she's the most important person, right? So I think definitely it was great for her to see, and I think it's great for her to see also kind of the involvement and that. And I do think that there's a lot of people who also deserve that recognition,
right.
and in the world and also within everyone I've met. So I was very, very humbled.
Interesting.
So thank you very much for that.
Interesting.
Yes.
Awesome. Perfect. Alrighty. So next question. I've taken a lot of your time getting to know about your personal life.
Yeah.
Tell us more about Nuitée. How does it differentiate itself in the competitive travel technology landscape? And what role do you play in driving its global growth as Senior Vice President?
Well, I look after the commercial and the sales side. So the travel industry in itself, it's behind the scenes, it's not easy. I think for the average person, it looks quite simple in terms of, you go and you book your average hotel on a platform, and then you're set and you're good to go. But behind that, there's so much in terms of connectivity, hotel rates, availability, and there's just a lot of things that, from a technology perspective, are very, very different and something that you can't even imagine. I didn't,
Right.
at least before I got into
Right.
into the field of that. And the industry is so big, and it's got so much opportunity to monetize. So what we at Nuitée really do, we actually provide over 2 million hotel properties, globally, and the technology is much more advanced. So, for us, it's important that we're really disrupting the way that we connect, and we're the only company providing an API, an open API. For travel, and really is that like full infrastructure approach.
Wow.
And that really caters to developers as well as any companies and organizations that actually want to have a travel vertical, right? So it's very different to what other connectors or other companies are doing behind the scenes. So we're really we want to help more enterprises to monetize and really increase their customer
Right.
retention, right? Because they're going to have this travel vertical that we can help, and it's very, very simple to connect. So we really try to simplify it that way.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's very unique. Interesting.
Yeah. We're really disrupting the businesses that are building the travel verticals by making it simpler to access that.
Interesting. So you're a very humble person for someone who's led multi-billion-dollar corporations and startups. How do you adapt your leadership styles to such diverse environments? Because when you're leading a startup, it's a very different ball game altogether. And when you're leading a multi-billion-dollar corporation, it's very different. So how do you switch between that? How do you change your leadership style? How do you manage that?
Well, I think it definitely wasn't easy. I think with larger corporations, a lot of the processes are already set up. So you're sort of going into a flow, and that's how that is pretty much how everything has to be set up. So it can be, in one way it's easier because there's a process, they're set up, and in one way it's, if you want to change anything, it's much harder, right? So you have to go through a lot of the instances to change that. Within smaller companies or startups or companies that are still in scope of getting there, there's kind of the plus side that you can, really be able to be part of that change and part of that impact and help to build those processes. But on the other side, there's no processes, right? So that's something, and I do think that you need a lot of good people to help, which is how I think in the current company I'm in with Nuitée, we have wonderful people who are really that. And what I mentioned at the speech, they show such drive. Everyone shows really great drive, and I think it's an amazing place where they just brought a lot of people who are very hardworking. So I think those are the two differences. And by approaching them in a way where, understanding like what's the best way for that particular organization. Is it sometimes better to kind of go in and do like a sniper approach and do something like really focused, or is it better to do something that's more broad and diverse, kind of divide and conquer? So you really have to balance out those two elements. But I think it sort of comes in with the processes and the setups. And of course, the amount of people that are involved. Yeah.
Interesting. So before we talk more about, what you're doing professionally, while you were talking, a question just came to my mind and asked this to a lot of young, successful female business leaders, because a lot of our audience is, are people, within the age of 25 to 35. You're a beautiful woman. You're successful.
Thank you.
You're welcome. When you look at social media today, a lot of young girls. I spoke to someone yesterday who deals with clients above the age of 50, and even with them, there is this social image that you need to have, right? They're being judged, they're being bullied. And I'm not talking about 16, 18-year-olds. I'm talking about, women in their early 20s, 30s, and at every age, and when you become successful, it's even more difficult. You have to look a certain way, you need to have a certain skin tone, and you got to wear your mascara or whatever in the right way. And there's so much of consciousness, and there's a lot of body shaming that happens, etc. Right? You said one statement that sometimes they said that you're not very feminine, when you're dealing with people. And how do you what is your take on these things? That's part A of my question. And to everybody who's watching, right? How have you handled negativity, judgment, sly comments, people, saying things behind your back? I'm sure you've had a lot of it. You're a very positive person and you're smiling all the time, but I'm sure you've had days where you've sat and cried in the washroom. How do you get over these things? So it's a two-part question for me.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's inevitable. There are people who just, regardless of if you're being kind to them or not, there's something that they might not like about you, right? So there's really nothing. I think it comes to, you can only control the way you react, right? You cannot control those people. And I always say that, may whoever loves me keep loving me and supporting me, and whoever doesn't, well, I hope that God makes their hearts kinder and softer. In general, I think that's kind of the way I try to scope it. But it's definitely not easy. I think for any girl, it's not easy, especially if you're growing up. And I think now it's even harder because there's just so much comparison, right?
Absolutely.
And I think this is one thing, and I mean, albeit I'm guilty of it, I think we tend to fall really, we start comparing. And it comes from a business scope, it comes from a physical scope, and you start thinking, okay, well, that person is doing this, should I be doing that too? And I think what is very important, and what I'd love to, also suggest really, is you have to be able to focus on yourself and just your development, because at the end of the day, everybody is going through something. Everyone has a battle that you have no idea about. So yes, I smile today, but inside, yes, there may be a lot of things that, that are not easy, that, anyone who's, like I always say this, like, you don't want anyone's life because you never know what they're going through.
Absolutely.
And I think that's important to do that. With social media on that, I think it's not easy for young girls to grow up because there's, I mean, albeit I think body positivity, et cetera, has been a little bit better now. But there's still a lot of expectations,
Right. Obviously.
especially
Absolutely.
look-wise and that. So I think it's important to surround yourself with people that actually see the real you, because, you know, at the end of the day, you're not ice cream. Not everybody's going to like you.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Absolutely. They're very well
So,
said.
yes.
I will steal that. I will steal that.
you know, so it's hard, but you have to sort of come to terms with it that, you know, you really have to term with you and your well-being is very important. And the more you start thinking about, okay, well, what is that person thinking about me? And it's I think it's mostly upsetting when you find out it's people that you are close to or you care about, right? And I think that's probably more hurtful than just people you don't even know, because, you know, well, to quote Taylor Swift, haters gonna hate. But I think, you know, you try to be kind with everyone, regardless of whether they are or not to you, because I think at the end of the day, it's your reaction that you can control. That's the only thing you can control.
Right.
And you can just control to continue being you and try not to compare yourself. It's definitely easier said than done. But yeah, it's important to have people in your life that kind of keep you grounded and just say, doesn't matter, you're still great. So, you know, be it your boyfriend, your husband, your friends, your mother, your father, you know, you have to have that. And if you are, you know, perhaps sometimes you don't have these people around you, it's just, you know, it's you and God, and you have to kind of believe in yourself at the end of the day and just stand strong.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that a successful woman, a successful businesswoman, or someone who's very successful like yourself, or to any other woman, do you think it's important for them to have a partner? It's important for them to be married. I read recently a lot of successful women today choose to stay single for various reasons. But what, according to you, you know, because you're in the shoes right now, you're a successful woman. What is your take on this? I'm sure you know a lot of other successful women who are successful at the peak of their career and choose not, you know, to get married or have a possessive boyfriend or whatever it is, right? They're more interested in living their life freely. And that's become a trend now with a lot of women in the corporate world. What's your take on that, Leyla?
It's an interesting question, because I think, you know, I think men would never have that kind of dilemma, right? Or that kind of question asked.
Absolutely.
I think. I do think that it's really about what makes you feel comfortable. I think it's, you know, it is harder depending on the culture that you're surrounded with, because I think there's sometimes that cultural pressure. But again, and it comes from, you know, a place of, you have to do what makes you happy, and it's wonderful to have somebody by your side who can support you. If that person doesn't support you, you should probably not continue with that, because, you know, you spend so much time at work, right? And then you come home and you need to be supported by whoever you're coming home to. So if that support is yourself, that's great. And if that support is, you know, your significant other, great also. I think you have to do, at the end of the day, and albeit this sometimes gets me in trouble, but you have to do what makes you happy, truly inside. And, you know, whether you're with someone or not, that shouldn't be a kind of anything that defines your happiness, right? But I think, again, it brings back to the first question of, you know, what is that, like, comparison? You know, you have to, like, somebody says, like, oh, okay, well, she's married, but she's not really successful in her career, or she's successful in the career, but is she married? So there's always this dilemma for women, unfortunately. But I think it's been, it's really, the roles have changed now, and I think it's much easier. But yeah, you know, you just have to do you.
Interesting. Yeah. What makes Leyla happy?
What makes Leyla happy? I love seeing the people I care about smiling. So if I can help with that, and I usually give them travel advice, so that's always a good thing. Other than that, yeah, I think it's a good question. I think just I'm very grateful. There's been a lot of things that I had to go through that, you know, and I think that half of the people don't even know. So it's great to know that you come out no matter what, with strength. I do love being surrounded in a great work environment with supportive colleagues and a great friend circle. I think, that, like I said, you're 8 hours or 9 hours, in our case, sometimes 12, 14, you're at work. So you have to kind of like the people that you're working with, right? Obviously, yeah. Additionally, you have to like the people that you're hanging out with because, that's you. At the end of the day, we don't have too much time. We're here. We're not here for a long time. We're here for a good time. So.
That's another one that I'm going to steal from you.
I won't even charge you for that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Last question, Leyla. Mm-hmm. What's the future now? What's the next step for you in terms of your career? What are you looking at?
A vacation. I think, I want to definitely help with the involvement of the, Nuitée and the company I'm in now, especially because it's great to see that change that we're doing within the travel technology industry. Mm-hmm. Having said that, I think, the future is so bright and there's so many things to do. So, we need to understand that if something is not working the right way, you really need to put some effort and maybe change it just to get yourself comfortable. For me, I think it's just, I guess the only way is up. So hopefully, and trying to spend more time with people that I care about and yeah, just enjoy the rest of this beautiful world. I do want to travel even more. And I mean, I think anyone who actually knows me would say that's crazy because, in the period of 2 weeks, I can be in Australia, in the US, and London, and so I do think like the more I travel, the more the more you realize you don't know. So I think that there's just so much more to discover in the world.
That's awesome. I'm going to reach out to you after this and get some travel tips from you.
Sure, of course.
I'm planning a solo vacation after a while, for a really long time. Mm-hmm. I'm planning to go somewhere in January. So I'm going to hit you up for
Definitely. And anything I can do to help, yes. We have to hook you guys up actually with our hotel inventory. So,
yes, absolutely. Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've had an amazing and insightful conversation today with Leyla. There's a lot that I've learned today. One key takeaway is you're not ice cream and not everyone's going to like you. I'm going to use that. And do I have your permission to use that?
Yes, you can
awesome.
Use that.
Perfect. But ladies and gentlemen, once again, Leyla Allahverdiyeva, our Business Leader of the Year, hospitality, with someone who's a hustler, a globetrotter, a traveler, always smiling, spreading positivity and energy. Thank you so much, Leyla, for being here today. It was an absolute pleasure to have, once again, a very beautiful woman sitting here today and telling us about her journey. I hope that her message and her story inspires you and tells you that you could be from Azerbaijan or from Switzerland or from Africa, but, you aim for the stars and you reach the moon. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.